story of the prodigal son that we have today is one that those of you who've been Christian for any time at all have heard any number of times. But there's some details in that story that make it such a powerful story. And I want to explain a few of those as I get into my theme for today. First, did you notice the very beginning? It said tax collectors and sinners were drawn to Jesus to listen to him. They were the ones who heard what Jesus was saying and who found it attractive. The message of Jesus had resonated more for the tax collectors and sinners than it did for the religious people of the time. Because it goes on to say that the Pharisees were complaining because Jesus was associating with these known sinners in his time. So Jesus makes up this story. It is a story that would have been shocking to the people in his time. Let me tell you why. So the younger son shames the family by asking for the inheritance before his dad died. I mean, that's pretty crass all of its own. The inheritance at that time would not have been money. It would have meant that the dad had to sell off ancestral property and then give the money to his son. Do you see the shame in that alone? Imagine property that had been in the family for generation after generation, selling that and giving it to the son. And then what does he do? The boy goes off and he squanders it in, I love this phrase, in a life of dissipation. You know what that is? X-rated. Eventually he finds out that his so-called freedom only lives to misery, and so he decides he's going to come back home. Now in the culture at the time of Jesus, there was a way for someone to come back home after they totally shamed their family. Let me describe it to you, because this is part of the power of the story. There would have been no more relationship between the father and his son. So the son would have to work through an intermediary to get any message to his dad. This is how it would happen. The son would come back. He would meet with one of the staff people. The father would go to the door of the house. This is actually part of their culture at that time. He would turn facing his back out towards his son. The intermediary would say, "Your son is here. He wants to come back." And the father would say, "My son is dead." That's how severe the break would be in a culture that was based on shame and honor. He would be allowed to go back and work only as a hired hand with no contact with his dad or in the inner household at all. Obviously in this story, that's not the way Jesus told the story. That's what would have been so shocking. Instead, the father notices his son from way off, runs out to greet him, embraces him, puts the ring of authority on his finger, and throws a feast. That would have been unheard of. It gets worse. The older son was out in the field. He also shames his dad by refusing to come in to the party. It would have been unheard of. It said the father went out and pleaded with him to come in. Upside down, once again. That would have never happened in that culture. Jesus was shocking his followers into showing them what God is like. God was not like the dads in their culture. God is like the father in the story that Jesus made up, who is eager to welcome any and everyone back into his embrace. That's why this story is so powerful. It's the quintessential story that Jesus tells about God and about us as well. We are assured that God embraces each one of us as we are. He wants only to be close to us. He wants to hold us. He wants to draw us forward to be the best people we can be, the best version of ourselves. And he only asks that we do the same for the people around us. The older son thought he deserved something else. We get in trouble when we think we deserve something from God. We don't earn anything. This is all grace. Our final song at Mass is going to be Amazing Grace. We don't earn this. We don't deserve anything from God. Each and every one of us. We don't have to imagine ourselves as horrible sinners. I'm guessing those of you who got up for our 8:30 Mass this morning. You're good people. You made good effort to be here. God knows everything about you, and He just wants to draw you in close. And then He asks us to do the same for those people around us. Our theme for this week is intercession. We're going deeper, though. We're not going to just do the usual stuff on intercession. Do you think the father in this story that Jesus made up, do you think he was praying up a storm for both of his sons? Probably. He never gave up. He never forgot his wayward son or his older son. Jesus tells us that the mark of being one of his followers is that we pray for our enemies. Let's talk about that just for a second. This is your homework for this week. Listen up. I want you to think of the short list of those who don't deserve your attention because they hurt you, because they've hurt one of your loved ones, because they've done something to make your life harder, because you just don't like them. It could even include politicians. So I want you to think of that list. And here's the homework part of it. Every day this week, I want you to pray by name for those people. Praying that God will bless them. Praying that God will draw them close. Praying that God will make their lives full and happy. And I want you to make that praying for them really concrete. Not just, Lord bless Deacon Brad. He's not on my short list, I assure you. You know, one of the advantages of praying the rosary as a form of intercession, one of the men in the parish gave me this line just this week. It's got a beginning, it's got an end, and you know you've accomplished something once you've done it. You know? I like that. I encourage you to think of some way that you can pray very concretely for the people that are on your list that you don't really like and that don't deserve you to be doing anything for them. Now here's the last part. Pray that God will soften your heart and fill you with compassion for every person. So before we continue Mass, I want you to think of that short list of the people that you're going to be praying for. Commit yourself to praying every day for them, by name, in a very concrete way. And then pray for yourself, that your heart will be softened, that you will be filled with compassion for every person. Let me tell you just a quick story before I close. I went into the seminary after I graduated from college. When I went into the seminary, I had a lot of love for God. I didn't have a lot of love for his people. Now you'd think those two things should kind of go hand in hand, right? Well, that became pretty obvious to me when I was in the seminary. So I began praying that God would fill me with a greater love for his people. And I can tell you, God has answered that prayer. I find it so much easier now to have genuine compassion for each and every person, even people that before I would have judged or somehow thought just weren't worthy of it. God does that work. When we open ourselves up to that, he allows us to have our hearts softened and changed. This week, pray for those that you find difficult. Pray that your own hearts will be softened, that you will be filled with compassion for everyone.